I've already had the pleasure of listening to Angela speak this morning, and I'm so pleased that you will too. Following her talk, which is entitled Transforming Neighborhoods for Good, we will have a Q&A, so save your questions. Please help me welcome Angela Blanchard.
I think I'll just be recruiting Kayla, don't you think? That was really a pretty good idea. Get her now, since you've trained her up really well. It's a great pleasure to be here. And before I get started, I thought I'd just do the technology thing and see if there it goes. So my story starts really close to where we're sitting. Before I tell you about that picture, I wanted to say thank you to Dr. Evans and to Nancy for having me. I am especially grateful that they took the time to come and visit my work, and they got a chance to see what things are like when we really put our hearts and minds into transforming communities, what people can do together. And then also I'd like to acknowledge Regina Rogers. If you don't know Regina, well, I don't know how that could be. How could you not know Regina? This is the only advice I have about her. If she wants you to do something, say yes early. It's just best. It saves a lot of time. Yeah. And then it is really special for me to be here with my mom. I always think that it's very nice that my mom lived long enough to see me redeemed. You know, really, don't you hope? That's your one hope. You live long enough so your mom can be proud of you. So really, our story begins on Fulton Street. I think of the pivotal moment in our family. And this picture here is my mom when there were 6 of us. And there were ultimately 8 of us. I'm the oldest. I'm the one with the adorable home perm. So, you know, my mom had a set of beliefs that fundamentally went like this. You could look good no matter what, and, you know, you should do something with yourself. And that meant, you know, fixing up. So this story, well, usually when my mom's not here, I say, you know, Catholic parents, 8 kids before they were 30, no rhythm. Sorry, Mom. It wasn't her fault, you know. It was the church. But you know, I just want to say also, we were awful. We were terrible, awful children. We were. And so you should meet her. She's incredible, and you should understand that she survived awful children. We were awful. We never did anything we were told. We merely considered parenting a little like the weather. You kind of observed it, but it didn't have that much to do with your decisions. But here's the miracle. You know, we were living, even when there were 8 of us, in this little bungalow, and thinking every day, my parents were, about how we weren't going to starve. And so, and the secret to all of that was a business that my parents started in our home. So Mom, Dad, going on 8 kids, printing press, paper cutter, dining room, you can picture it. We were the family collating machine. So when everything had to be collated, we put it around the dining room table. We all washed our hands and marched around the table until it was done. So I grew up learning about work, learning to work, seeing 2 people that had these incredible standards about what it meant to do a good job and do a good job for your customers and be in integrity. And, you know, I remember distinctly them printing something that was just a little off and throwing the whole thing away and doing it again, even though it meant staying up all night. I still kind of feel a little sad when I think about that. I bet you do too. That was a long night. But all that I want in the world, and the source of all my work, really starts here, because what my parents were able to do to work their way out of the zero opportunity they were born into, to provide for themselves and for us, and to launch us into the world with a life very different than the one they had had. That's what I want for every single person truly in the world. I do believe that our country has the best soil in which to plant dreams and hard work. And so my work's really just been about making sure that all the families that start out like ours actually get a chance. And then I'm not quite sure why. It's probably some Cajun thing. Okay, so I'm from Houston, as you know, and Houston sits at the nexus, at the intersection of two monumentally important global trends. And so I've started in South Park, and now we're zooming out to the world. So what's happening in the world right now? We're living in the most migratory period in human history. 65 million people today, more each day, have been forcibly displaced. They are living outside of their homes, away from their own countries, not because they got up as I did one day and hitchhiked out of Beaumont. So, she earned all that white hair she has. But because they had no choice. War, weather, wealth, something displaced them, and now they're forced to start their lives over, to dream of a new life, to create it out of their imagination in another and different place. At the same time, all over the world, people are moving to cities. So we're also living in the most urbanized time in human history. In 2009, we crossed the line of the 7.5 billion people in the world. More now live in cities than live in the countryside. This is a first. So the role of cities and the rise of cities worldwide has given a rise also to a new job that cities have. And that job is really about welcoming. That job is really about figuring out who's in your city and making sure, whether they're trying to cross the tracks, the river, or an ocean, to an opportunity, that they have a chance. Because the great cities of the future, the cities of the future that will succeed, will be those cities that can take advantage of human potential, that can welcome everybody and give them a shot. This is just, okay, there you go. It came a little after I made it. Women are smarter than technology. That's the point there. So as people are arriving, people are arriving with dreams and desperation. And so we have to figure out how that desperation in each of our cities, how that's turned into aspiration, and then how that's turned into participation. And it's been my job in Houston to lead an organization founded for this purpose. And I'm going to have to just give up on this if it doesn't start working a little quicker. So, and to start the work in each neighborhood means to focus where people land. So cities create landing places for people. Where's the neighborhood where people get a start? And there's been so much talk, and by the way, there's been so much division in our country. We can barely talk about anything without lining up on one side or another of a huge gulf. We'll leave that to the political arena. We send our political gladiators into the arena and let them try to annihilate one another. Meanwhile, on the ground, right here, we get stuff done. Yes. So I've been asked if I'm a member of this party or that party or where I fall on the continuum. I fall at the get stuff done. I cleaned that up for my mom. I really use that 4-letter word. But yeah, that's where we fall, on the get stuff done. That's the party I intend to belong to the rest of my life. So people land in communities, or they're born in neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods oftentimes are labeled poor. It's the starting place, and resources aren't there. And when you ask people, what comes to mind when you think of a poor neighborhood? We have a whole litany of things, because for decades we've thought about help, but it's all been predicated on the idea that first something was broken. So we want to help a poor neighborhood, and where we start is by documenting everything wrong with it. You know, the lacks, gaps, needs, wants, the broken stuff. Here's what's not working. Here's where things should be different. This is, maybe we can just, I don't know what to do. It's just not working. Oh, and I have such pretty pictures. I said this morning, technology is like dating. You know, is he going to show up? Is he going to have good manners? Is he going to do what he says he's going to do? Is it going to be a big lag? Or can you just be stood up right there, all dressed up, no technology? So when we think of poor neighborhoods, we've been riveted on helping people. So if you think of immigrants or inner city neighborhoods or all of the narratives we spun in the country for decades now have been about the problems in those places and the problems with those people. And it's a short jump from thinking about the problems in those places to thinking of people as the problem. And that's been very dangerous and that's been very damaging because most of us, when we're welcome into a place, when we're seen as having potential, when you applied, for example, to the university, we didn't ask Kayla to document all the ways in which she struggled. We didn't ask her to write every failing. We didn't ask her to chronicle the things she hadn't been able to do. We said instead, you have potential. Tell us where you're at your best. So our approaches now to helping people have to change. Because the dangerous and destructive and toxic lens of first discover what's wrong with people, document that fully, and then try to fix them so they're more like us, that does not work. And it's hurtful. So at neighborhood centers, now Baker Ripley, we had a big awakening because, of course, most of our funders want to hear how bad it is. And every time we told that story, in fact, the first time I read in a particular social work text that I don't think is being used anymore, a case study of a family much like ours, I remember reading it and I put my hand over it because in my mind, I carried my family. And I was so afraid to think that my parents, who were my heroes, would read that version of our story. And that was not the version. That wasn't how we saw ourselves. It didn't include our triumphs. It didn't include what they overcame. It didn't include this enormous ambition to raise children able to do things they had not been able to do. It didn't include their ability to creatively come up with the idea for a business and deliver on it and make different things possible. That wasn't what we read. So what we saw at neighborhood centers was, and what we were compelled to do constantly, is tell a story again and again about the people that we meant to help, but always about what was wrong with them. And by the way, and this is the philanthropy thing, it's really terrible, awful, bad. This is how many thousands of them there are, and it's worse this year than it was last year. And that doesn't work for anybody. And now I say things get me into trouble, but I'm home now, right? Y'all are going to be good to me. I don't care how many poor people there are. My entire life's been spent on developing programs for poor people, and I don't want to hear how many poor people there are, because all of us, at some point, either we or a family member started there. That's everyone's story. The question we ask ourselves about our cities and communities is not how many poor people there are, or how many immigrants there are, or how bad off that particular community is, or how left behind that neighborhood is. The question is there anywhere for them to go? Because if all I know to do, for as long as I know to do it, as hard as I can, won't get me out, then that's a recipe for disaster. That's what we should fear. Not poverty, not struggle, not challenges, not problems. We should fear that if all we know to do won't make a difference, that's dangerous. So my work has taken me, I accidentally got famous. I didn't mean to, because I was raised by mom. My mom and dad didn't have any interest in recognition or acknowledgement. My father was, every year, people would say, how's the printing business? My father would say, oh my God, I don't know. I'm not really. I hope we make it to December. And I was the worrier. And I would listen to this and I would think, oh my God, what are we going to do? More kids, no money. This looked bad to me. And I remember fretting. I go to my dad, who had lots on his mind, and I say, Dad, is it going to be all right? Are we really going to be okay? And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I heard you tell Mr. Barinko, business isn't good. I mean, are we going to make it? And he said, oh, for God's sakes, Angela, of course we're going to make it. And I said, well, why'd you tell him that it was bad? He says, do you want everyone to go in the printing business? That's the truth, every word of it. Yeah. So I did kind of want everybody to go into the business of helping communities and neighborhoods, but I didn't have a plan for being famous. But so much that we did was it inspired people. This approach of looking not for what's wrong, but for what's right. Not studying communities from the standpoint of the lacks, gaps, needs, wants, but focusing instead on what are these neighborhoods getting right? What's giving life to that community? What is the history? What are the strengths that were born here, that live now in these neighborhoods, and how can we build on that? That was such a powerful thing, and worldwide people are trying to figure that out. So last year I had the opportunity to be in Germany. Now Germany has stepped up to welcome 1.1 million Syrians into a country that isn't the U.S. I mean, they don't have this policy of, how do you be an American? Well, you come here, you get on the few, and terribly difficult and tremendously challenged past the citizenship, and you one day you're a citizen, you get your card, they give you a little flag, right? And you're an American. Well, how do you become German? So Germany now is undertaken. They've done a beautiful job at welcoming, at creating shelter. It's really a redemptive moment for the country, and they're fully aware of it. Now, how do these people come to learn, earn, and belong in Germany? How do they become German? See, and the beautiful thing about this country, because we were founded on an idea and an ideal, it is possible to sign up for democracy and capitalism and become an American. So here I am in Germany, and I'm working with government leaders and nonprofit leaders to figure out how do we create landing places in cities? What does have to be done so that people are not isolated? Because the most dangerous thing is for people to get a message that they don't matter, and that there isn't a place for them in the world, and that what they have to offer and what they've inherited from their families, what they've learned from their communities, what they have as a legacy, the world doesn't need. And that kind of isolation breeds one of two things, either rage or despair, and both are expensive. So, and listen, I will tell you, this is universal. So this doesn't have anything to do with, I went on from Germany to the refugee camps in Jordan near the Syrian border, though I didn't tell my mom that before. I told her, no problem, everything's cool, it won't be dangerous. We've been lying to her like that forever. But it's universal. It's universal, this desire, this hunger to learn, earn, and belong. This is what we share as human beings. And so when I look at places, I was invited also to Ferguson. Now, you all read about Ferguson, and of course you read the news version of Ferguson. You never read the history, the ongoing horrible, horrible history of what had been done again and again to the community that then led up to the incident that you read about. But I was in Ferguson, and honestly, after a few days, I wanted to burn something. Because there is a thing that happens to you. It happens to all of us. If we're told we don't matter, if we're written off, if somehow it's communicated to us that there isn't a place for us in the world, that the world doesn't need us, rage or despair, both are expensive. And I found that the places I love the most are the ones that are fiercely and determinedly going after the idea that the world needs all of us. Now, we won't ever see that realized, But you know, leadership isn't about doing what's easy. It's not about doing what we get to see accomplished in our lifetime. And that's the safe approach most people want. You know, you want to be professionally, spiritually, emotionally attached to something you're pretty sure is going to work out. But the world doesn't need that kind of leader right now. Right now, the world needs the kind of leaders that work on things that are hard and difficult and complicated, where the conversations are painful and that you struggle to have them and you come back again and again and again to get a better understanding of the neighborhood you want to help, or the family you care about, or the city you're trying to turn into a welcoming place of opportunity. So this is what the world's calling for now. There aren't any simple solutions anymore, and we can't unglobalize the world. I'm sorry. And, you know, sometimes I make these speeches and people get mad at me. I'm like, hey, I'm just reporting. You know, I'm not in charge of this. I'm just pointing out what I've noticed, you know. So we can't unglobalize the world, but it becomes frightening. We're connected now. We're interdependent. Our economy, nothing in Houston that we tout as a success, everything that's keeping our region thriving, full of opportunity, everything is interconnected. The port, the medical center, oil and gas, everything. So as hard as it is for us to comprehend and embrace that interconnectedness, it's the root of how we need to make decisions. And we need to approach things from that the holistic perspective. It would be so nice if we could return to a time that we imagined but never really existed, when things were simpler and, you know, you could play in the front yard and everybody came home at 5 o'clock, and, you know, but that wasn't true for everyone then. And it's not true for everyone now. And it's all right that we're together now at a time when it's a challenge, because this is an interesting world we're living in. And I have some wonderful news for you in this respect. So from Germany to Lebanon to Jordan, from Ferguson to Lower Ninth after Katrina, to Sunnyside in Houston, to Pittsburgh where I was a month ago, and to Columbus where I was a month before that, it's the same story. The human spirit is not extinguishable. Everywhere we go, in every neighborhood, in every community, there's someone with the same burning desire that my parents had, that I had. And that's the desire to figure out a way to be a part of a larger world, the hunger to earn, learn, and belong. I'm always asked this question, so what about those people that just don't try? So I get to say this, you know, I've been at this 40 years. I love getting old, because, you know, I like the fact that you say, well, no, honey, I've been doing this for 40 years, and, you know, in 40 years, I think I'd have seen that if that was a real thing. You know, that ain't a thing. That person that just doesn't exist. I'd have run across them. I've been a lot of places. But I think the thing is, there are instances where I've seen a person whose pilot light's gotten a little dim, because we do a lot of things now to give people messages about why they don't matter and why they don't count. But you can change that. And it's much like I taught when I was speaking with German leaders. The change we're seeking in the world now is not a program. And if you're still waiting for the federal government, well, you're all grown ups. You're not waiting for the federal government, are you? You got past that, right? All the changes we're seeking in the world right now happen in small rooms. And they happen around tables like this one. And they happen when people are authentically invested in the idea that we're in this together, and that this city will be great because of the relationships you build and the understanding. I will say one more thing about helping. You know, it ain't help if they didn't ask. So there's a lot of help over the decades that I've seen. A lot of money, a lot of effort and time has gone into doing things to and for people who didn't ask. And the trouble with that is it wasn't their priority. So when we welcome people to Houston, there's a family I've befriended, largely because these people are so friendly, you can't not. They took 13 years to get to the United States. They come from a village in Pakistan, and like many people, like many Muslims, they were targets for terrorism. Their lives were threatened, and they moved multiple times, and then finally the whole house was shot up, and they left Pakistan on the only visa they could get, which was a tourist visa to Indonesia. As soon as they arrived, they were arrested. And because they hadn't had the appropriate, they spent 6 months there trying to get out of a detention center to get to this country. And still the route was circuitous. And they are so fundamentally and deeply grateful to be here. So when you spend time with people and you listen deeply to what it is they're trying to achieve, at neighborhood centers we say the change begins with the first new question, not what's wrong, not what is it you need, or what are you lacking, but what are you strong? How are you strong? What was it that enabled you to do this? What inspired you to make the decision to move your family halfway across the world or just across the tracks, which sometimes is a whole different world in itself. But getting to deep understanding about what matters most to people. So it's a question that says, when you first held your child in your arms, what was your longed for hope for them? What was the one thing you hoped more than anything else would be true about their life? It's finding out how people create within communities things that work. And when we are going to help, when we're going to invest in those communities, we do it alongside the leaders who are already there. And there are leaders in every community. I once heard a rather snobby person in Washington, where they have big thoughts and not as much action as I would like, at least not of the construction, say, speak about a community and say, there is no there there. And I said, there's a there anywhere there's people. The human spirit is not extinguishable. There's someone who cares enough to go to work on that community, someone who cares enough to work with their neighbors to change it. And so that's what we look for. And when we raise money, there are some great pictures of a 5-building, 4-acre site called Baker Ripley. We built to welcome all the people that were coming to Houston. And when we raise money, someone will find that. I got a new one. It's not working either, though. These are ornamental. What in the name of God? All right. See? Like dating, Someone, as they just doesn't show up, or they forget the tickets to the event you're going to. But the thing about the fundraising for Baker Ripley is we came out of that neighborhood whose only reputation in Houston was called the Gulfton Ghetto. It was known in D.C. as the highest juvenile crime zip code in the country. Advice in the community was never drive through it, drive around it. The police used to say, first they said to us as we were going in, "Are you crazy?" And then they said, "We don't even like to go there. We wait for them to throw the bodies out." And so, that was the state of things. And that was the only story anybody had about the community. But hours of interviews and discussions and knocking on doors and being with the people in the community, what we learned instead was that people had come to Gulfton because there were cheap apartments, and they had come from all over the world. It was literally the nation's new Ellis Island. Every single person there had a dream and a hope. They were already working on it. Moreover, they were helping one another. And so we left that community with a whole different story that we took to philanthropy, not about what was broken, but about what was possible, what people had been able to do on their own without help. And when you invest beside people, not behind them, pushing them toward what you want, or in front of them, dragging them to a higher level of performance. You see that it's a powerful transformative change, because we say, what would you like to see in this community? The second question is, and what will you be willing to do? What can you contribute to make that happen? So it's not our job to keep the work going in each of the neighborhoods where we work. It's owned by the neighborhood, and then they keep it going. Most of the people in Houston believe that the leaders of the future will come out of these neighborhoods, and they will be the people that already triumphed over lots of hardships. They are people with a history and a story about struggle, and a little bit like ours. I always have to say, you know, when we were little and we'd go places, there was my cute little mom and dad, and then all of us. And people used to look at us and shake their heads, because of course there was no way that this could turn out well. And well, it could have had. We were also rotten children, but not entirely. But it wasn't my parents' fault. But I think, you know, these places, these families, these people that we've written one story about. Your job as community leaders, your job as investors in this institution and in the communities that surround it, your job at every institution where you work or volunteer or practice your faith, your job is really to look for the other story, the story about what people are like when they're at their best, what people are like when they're at their strongest, what are the gifts and strengths that people can bring to the table, and then how do we set a table that welcomes everyone. So, yeah, somebody just took a big deep breath, and I did too. Thank you for that reminder. Was that you? So I'll pause now, you know, and have some questions, because listening is really important. And I wanted to say one more thing before I did. When I left Beaumont, you know, really seriously, you know, on my thumb, it was, you could go anywhere in the United States hitchhiking, and did you know that? 1972. I saw a good deal of this country. This was not wise. I was invincible, as every 18-year-old is. But when I left, you know, I saved up some money and then went to UT, and I was there for almost 3 years in Plan 2, and I loved it, because I really felt I was learning, and I learned to think. And then I ran out of money and ran into some real difficulties, and Mom and Dad, you know, the business had gotten better, and they said, well, we'd help you go to school now. Before that, my dad's policy was, you're 18, you're on your own, don't call home collect. My mom and I broke that rule all the time. But so when I came back to Lamar, you know, the wonderful thing for me was and also my dad said, you have to major in something I understand. He didn't know what plan into what. You know, that's an honors program. He didn't know what that was either. You know, he still wasn't sure I was smart. So when I said business and accounting, that sounded like something that would lead to a livable wage. And so he was firmly in support of it. But I got a wonderful education here that wouldn't have been available to me at UT from professors that actually cared about not a 400-person classroom, but a 40-person classroom, from professors that actually cared about what happened to us when we left. And, you know, there was no way, had I graduated from UT, there'd have been a professor like Mr. Barlow, who actually knew every single hiring partner at every major accounting firm in Houston. And, you know, I did pretty well, except for tax. I didn't do so well in tax. I'm glad, because had I done well, I might have ended up there, God forbid. But you know, there were 8 accounting firms, and I had 7 offers because of what Lamar provided, because hiring partners in Houston said this about Lamar students: they've gotten a good education, but more importantly, they know how to work. They come from families that had to work for things, and when we hire them, they already know how to work. And I personally think that's a wonderful compliment to this university. I think it's still true. So. So I want to do whatever you want me to do. So questions, comments? Yes. Step one is to meet your neighbors. When I told the story this morning of working in New Orleans after Katrina, and I'd be in lower ninth because I'm really fascinated with what people do when the slate's wiped clean. You know, that's when you see real leadership, when it's really hard and you have to make it up. So I'd be in lower ninth and I'd hear people in lower ninth saying, yeah, it's really tough here, but you know, Lakeview, they've got it easy. So you can go drive 15 minutes in New Orleans to get to Lakeview. People in Lakeview are going, well, you know, it's really rough here. You know, and lower ninth, they're getting all the help. And it's like, and you people live 15 minutes apart. You should visit one another. And that's the first step. You know, we give in Houston what I call the I had no idea tour. And it's because inevitably at some point somebody says to me, I had no idea this neighborhood was here. I had no idea these people were here. I had no idea of the history of Pear Orchard or South Park or where. We don't know our own city. So the first step is to learn your city, to learn about the leaders that came out of those communities, to learn what they believe in about that community, why it's there in the first place. What are they aspiring to? What are they actually getting done? So it's easy to drive through anybody's neighborhood and say, well, look at that. What a mess. Because in some way, you're looking at something you don't even have any idea if that's on its way to being better or the product of despair. So the important thing is talk to the people, get to the bottom of the story of what's happening there and what people are trying to get done. You know, neighborhood associations are powerful as a voice of the community. And, you know, there's the saying we always hear around social activism or any of that, and it's you give voice to the voiceless, but your job is to give ears to the earless, right? That listening part is really powerful. So. And the first new question is, what's great about this place? What do you love about it? Who's your best neighbor? What makes them a great neighbor? You know, what made this a great place to bring up your child? You know, what's the one lesson that your kid learned here they couldn't have learned anywhere else? Yeah, and that story is in every neighborhood. It's in every neighborhood, but you have to get past, you know, now sometimes we'll go to neighborhoods and people are so sure if you're visiting, they've all been trained that they're supposed to tell you every problem, but it doesn't take long to get past that if you really mean it, to find out what's really going on. It really works. It really works. Yes?
Thank you so much. I have enjoyed. Thank you so much. I have enjoyed your words of wisdom. And Beaumont would made me think. Over here in the South Park area, do you remember smelling the bread that was being baked over here and the coffee and texture and everything? Well,
yeah.
just the other day, I mean, we have to be careful. We have to be sure that growth is not leaving.
Yeah.
We have this beautiful part of town where you're from, South Park. And I had someone tell me the other day from the West End, oh my God, it's like a war zone over there. You know, what you were saying about,
Yeah.
we don't visit each other.
Yeah.
Well, my interest is that. And I just enjoyed so much your remarks. And it has given me a new lease on life to pay attention to what's going on in all of the neighborhoods. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah. Yes, it's a good idea not to talk about people you haven't talked with. Really good idea, right? What else?
Said. So that positive message could really be heard by so many other people that irrespective of their social economics, there's a sense of despair. There's a sense of lack of control and an ability to really make transformational changes and have some of the perceived values and norms that we enjoyed. And so I wish this message could be a press release that we could send out, and that could really espouse and extol the values of what you're talking about to make the transformational changes for all of us.
Well,
so
thank you.
thank you.
So I like to say the first 1,000 times the hardest. I mean, you know, the first time I said these things, people said, "Oh God, what a flake." In fact, there was a guy at a now, I do take a certain degree of pleasure in saying this, at a now much smaller nonprofit that he used to refer to me as the redheaded flake at neighborhood centers, and I was like, okay, we'll see how this turns out. But you know, the hardest part is meaning it, and you continue putting one foot in front of the other, and to do what you can with what you have, where you are. We went through an era where we built large institutions and we built big agencies and we built huge systems, and we thought if something went wrong, they were going to come and fix it. But two things happened. They were slow and unresponsive and they didn't come, or they showed up and their fix was worse than the problem. And it's a time now, and this is what I say to the young people that come to work for us, the time now is, how do we craft out of the available resources right where we are the solutions that work here in this community? Because those things, those models developed elsewhere that were stamped out across the nation, one neighborhood after another, we came to regret most of those because they did a kind of violence to the strengths that were already there. So you own this city. It's yours. It belongs to all of you. If you like the story of how things are going here, great. Have a glass of wine, put your feet up, don't worry about it. If you don't, it's your job. And the solutions that are going to be lasting and really work are going to come from rooms like this one. That's I'm certain about. So,
your message of communicating with people, understanding them, empathizing, but focusing on the positives, it resonates so strongly with us, particularly that are involved with the underserved community.
Yeah.
Because they're not really looking for sympathy, they're looking for understanding and compassion and a willingness to work alongside them. So we applaud your efforts, and if I was pushy about asking you to come to Beaumont and come back and do this, I'm proud of it.
Look, I pretty much would do anything Regina told me to do. Yeah. So,
Well, just stay there.
I'll stay here for just a sec. And what Nancy tells me, so. Well, you've been such a lovely audience, and I want to say that it's people like you that actually make cities great through your welcome and your kind and careful tending of the people in them. So it's been an honor to be here, and thank you for welcoming me. Perfect.
So, you guys ready?
I will definitely use it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So, she was wonderful, wasn't she?